Welcome back to another edition of Just an Opinion. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love my sitcoms. I'm particularly drawn to such things as one-season wonders, spin-offs, and shows that they started out as one concept, but they became something entirely different. So today, I'm going to discuss the short-lived television series, The Torkelsons.
People say God looks out for the working man. Sure hope he's looking out for me.
What's fascinating about this show is that it ran for one season, but then before the second season, it was repackaged as something different, even with a different title, Almost Home. The name change was only the start of the changes, as we lost and gained some characters along the way, in addition to other adjustments. I'll start off with discussing just the Torkelsons. Season 1 ran from September of 1991 through June of 1992. I couldn't tell you how it fared in either ratings or reviews, but in a time where sitcoms were all the rage, it managed to stand apart from the norm, but maybe a little bit too far from what audiences were used to. The best way I could describe the concept of this show is that it was a modern adaptation of The Waltons or Little House on the Prairie, taking place in Pyramid Corners, Oklahoma. The focus being the Torkelson family, with Mother Millicent raising her 5 children. Dorothy Jane, Stephen Floyd, Ruth Ann, Chucky Lee, and Mary Sue. This family didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, never having new clothes or toys. Their income issues were an unfortunate constant of the show.
And I appreciate your diligence, I certainly do. As bill collectors go, you are the perseverance king.
Even the first episode having the family in danger of having their washing machine repossessed.
Now, what do you mean, repossessed?
That means they're coming to take something away, Mama.
Thank you, Pumpkin.
So for extra money, they took in a boarder, Wesley, affectionately known as Boarder Hodges. They were a tight family and all loved each other. Most of the time.
He's here, Dorothy Jane. It's him. Riley Roberts next door. He says he wants to see you. He says he wants to ask you something. This is it. This is it. This is it. She fell for it.
So let's talk a little bit about characters. Millicent was everything you could hope for in a single mom.
With me working full-time, each of you will be faced with new... Hey! I'm talking to you! Now line up!
She was strong and took pride in everything she did.
We are all just ordinary citizens with mortgages and car payments and overdue doctor bills. And the few extra dollars we make selling our homemade jams and jellies is the difference between putting hamburger or beans on our dinner table. Yeah!
She didn't have any of the finer things in life and taught her children to appreciate family and friends so as to not get caught up in material items they didn't have. Moving on to Dorothy Jane. If Millicent was the general of the Torkelson clan, then Dorothy Jane was her sergeant-at-arms. While she took on a big role with helping raise the children, Dorothy Jane had dreams of her own, most often spoken to the man in the moon.
Man in the moon, tonight I'm a young woman filled with anxiety. You see, this Saturday night, Mama has agreed to let me host my very first by invitation-only social affair.
But she was also a typical American teenager who developed a schoolgirl crush on their neighbor Riley Roberts, who you might remember as Kirk McRae, that jerk that Winnie dumped Kevin for on the Wonder Years. But I digress. And on to Stephen Floyd. He was the eldest boy of the household, and he was very often in trouble.
Dorothy Jane, kindly escort the Reverend into the living room where I shall join you momentarily.
While his acting out was very much a form of budding teenage angst, later episodes revealed that it was partially due to his father abandoning the family. But he also would sometimes resort to fighting in defense of anyone disrespecting his family.
But I'm not sorry that I kicked Billy Ray Hawkins' butt. And I think you should at least give me a chance to tell you why I did it.
I know why you did.
You do?
And I thank you for defending us.
You do?
Yes, I do.
And next we have Ruth Ann. She was that little sister that knew how to push every one of Dorothy Jane's buttons.
You broke into my secret drawer. Wasn't secret enough, was it?
You can't have nothing to do with this.
How many copies did you make of this book?
She often served as a prankster, aimed at humiliating her older sister. But there was some heart to her character as seen when Millicent started dating again.
Have a nice night. Go. Get on out of here. You can't date my mama. You're not my daddy.
Ruth Ann?
I don't want you to go out with him, Mama.
Now most people know that Chucky Lee would go on to play
Minkus. Was it achieved by Minkus? Does it go to Minkus? Minkus, right?
But on this show, he was just a sweet, fun-loving fiddle player.
Hey, Dreamer, bet you didn't even know I could play the fiddle.
But he carried an immense sense of pride of his family and where he came from.
And I think you should be proud of where you come from. Oklahoma, the land of Will Rogers and Oklahoma Sooners football, with more horses per capita than any other state of the union.
I thought that was Texas.
Well, you're wrong, Dorothy Jane. You're wrong about a lot of things.
And rounding out the Torkelson clan was the adorable Mary Sue.
It's the mailman. Did I get anything?
Leave me alone.
No. You got any free samples?
Now it certainly was a sitcom staple to have a cute child in the cast. But luckily she wasn't obnoxious or overbooked. I think that Mary Sue's best scenes, though, were with Border Hodges.
I'd be willing to take a bite of that sandwich if you want some help.
I don't want to spoil your dinner, Mary Sue.
You won't spoil my dinner. I'm always hungry. Mama says I got an empty leg.
Border Hodges was played by William Shallert, who boasted an impressive resume of previous television roles. This experience somewhat carried over into this role as he served as the counseled elder to the whole Torkelson family.
Dorothy Jane, you can no more push your mother into being ready for romance than you can demand that those flowers bloom, or get an old cuss like me to make my point any more quickly than I want to.
His dry wit, though, was a great contrast to the rambunctious kids whom he shared a home with.
We won't be long.
Risha.
No.
Now, he wasn't a main character, but I have to talk about Kirby Scroggins. Much like Screech and Steve Urkel, Kirby's sole purpose in life was to win the affection of the love of his life, in this case Dorothy Jane.
Dorothy Jane, the very first thing you go on in your entire life should be with me.
Why?
Because I am obsessed with you.
He was a klutz, wildly ignorant, yet Kirby was a good old country boy, unabashedly confident in who he was.
I am desperate, but I don't show it. Hey, Dorothy Jane! You mean like that?
Yeah, that kind of...
Now this was certainly a sitcom with many silly situations.
You have to get in the middle of other people's lives because it's your life's business to get in the middle of other people's lives. That doesn't make you right.
But there were some serious subjects tackled. Dorothy Jane and Millicent were the focal characters, working together but in constant disagreement too.
I don't care what she proposes. She's your daughter. You're going to agree with anything she said.
They never agree with each other.
Dorothy Jane actually helped her mother gain some of her confidence back to see herself as a beautiful woman worthy of someone else's love.
I forgot how to be a woman.
Mama, you are a beautiful woman. In a frumpy dress covered with cranberry sauce.
But in turn, Millicent had to help her daughter look beyond her own parents' relationship when developing her opinions on love and marriage.
You can't be afraid of marriage just because somebody else's didn't work.
Even if it's my mother and my father's?
Oh, especially if it's your mother and your father's.
While the Torkelsons were a tight family, they were also a broken family since their father, Randall, had abandoned them. In a few episodes, he blew back into town, much to the younger children's delight. But Dorothy Jane spurned him, not allowing herself to feel any emotions towards her daddy.
Dorothy Jane? You gonna say goodnight to me?
Night.
Why do you hate me, Dorothy Jane?
Millicent felt that it was appropriate for her and Randall to part ways for good, but at the same time wanted Dorothy Jane to still love and respect her father.
You haven't given your father a hug and a kiss since he's been back here.
Mama.
I want you to give your father a hug and a kiss.
Porter Hodges' backstory remained a little bit of a mystery until his daughter-in-law visited him, wanting to reconcile after a family tragedy and years of silence and misunderstanding. This episode was unique since it united William Shallert with his television daughter from the past, Patty Duke.
I'm your only link to your old life, and your husband knows that. Now, he's adopted Molly, he loves her, he loves you, and he's a good man. And I think he was just trying to shield you from painful memories. And that's fine.
There were also some notable guest appearances, including a pre-famous Drew Carey.
Oh!
Millicent Torkelson.
Obviously, I have not yet gotten my point across.
Dorothy Jane Torkelson.
Oh, yippee.
The Scroggins have returned. Yeah! Actually, we never even left. Yeah! Okay.
Mother Love.
Who gave you the right to come in here and tell me how to raise my own daughter?
Hey, she called me. You feed me French toast. I was just an innocent bystander talking on the radio. Give me some coffee.
And even Elmo shows up.
I hear first grade is no piece of cake, Elmo. Maybe I should quit after kindergarten.
Is Murray still going to get a job?
I may have to.
That should be no problem with a kindergarten education.
The end of the first season came in June of 1992. It didn't tie together any plot points nor give any indication of what season 2 would bring. Who knows why, but the show was in for a major shift when it returned almost a year later in February of 1993. When season 2 began, the fans saw the immediate shift as the Torkelsons even changed their name to Almost Home.
Love comes in unexpected places. Life turns in unexpected ways. I swear we laugh at these days.
Season 2 and the new title began with the Torkelsons unfortunately losing their home, moving from Pyramid Quarters, Oklahoma, all the way to Seattle, Washington.
This time my mother could not make the mortgage, and they're foreclosing this house and kicking the Torkelsons out of Pyramid Corners, Oklahoma forever.
Yay!
Well, I guess unfortunate depending on who you ask. Millicent took a live-in job with a wealthy child clothing designer, helping him with the housework, but also helping manage his 2 spoiled children.
Gregory, can you give me a ride over to Heather's?
Well, let's narrow this down, shall we? Are we talking about Teen Talk Heather? Or flunked out of homeroom Heather? My personal favorite, 21 and still a junior Heather.
You think that you're so funny, Gregory. It's flunked out of homeroom Heather. She did not flunk out. She forgot to go.
The kids joined her, of course, but she lost a few along the way. Sort of. Stephen Floyd and Ruth Ann were suddenly dropped from the cast, never to be mentioned again. Now, there are some fan theories out there that the 2 of them went to live with their father. That would make sense, of course, but there's absolutely no evidence supporting that. It's just a theory. So, I digress. Millicent, Dorothy Jane, Chucky Lee, and Mary Sue joined the Morgan family, who all had one name only, Brian, Gregory, and Molly. The change of scenery, characters, and tone made it much more of a modern sitcom, definitely taking cues from the Brady Bunch with the combination of 2 families. So let's talk about the new characters. We'll start with Brian Morgan. He was the typical father consumed with his work. While he provided a great life for his children, he also neglected them, which contributed to them being aimless and out of control.
Yeah.
Something's happened I think we should talk about.
What'd they do?
Who?
My little ones, Beelzebub and Mephistopheles. What did they do?
Millicent helped Mr. Morgan slow down a little bit.
Just calm down. It's a business dinner.
You're right. It's just dinner with Sir Reginald Harrington, one of the wealthiest men in England, and the man who holds the future of my company in his hands.
See, nothing to worry about.
Jason Marsden played Gregory and was a staple to sitcoms, typically playing the best friend on shows like Boy Meets World and Step by Step. He was a big talker who usually couldn't deliver on his promises.
Ow! Ow! What are you hitting me for? My guy let me down. If you want to be mad at anyone, be mad at him.
I want to be mad at you. You always have a guy who has a guy who has a guy who has a guy, and none of them come through. What does that say to you, Gregory?
That I need to find more reliable guys?
While the older of all the kids, many of the episodes focused on his adventures with Chucky Lee, which were actually really hilarious.
Okay, Chucky Lee, the refrigerator is all set. We'll wait outside, and the next person that opens this door will get a nice cream pie right in the face, and I will get $10,000 and some lovely parting gifts.
Molly was played by a pre-famous Brittany Morgan, who we lost too soon. She was so on point as the typical ditzy teen.
There's no such thing as a typical teenager.
Like, you know, really. Okay, so Heather really said that about Heather. So what did Heather say about Heather?
Okay, maybe one.
Much of the comedy of the show was at her expense, but it was all in good fun. And she was a great counterpart to Dorothy Jane. But of course, we are dealing with two teenage girls, so the fights were pretty constant.
Heather is perfect. Something you'll never be. I'll never be as boring as you. And I never want to be as vapid as you. Wait a minute. What'd you call me? Trust me, it's bad. I thought so.
And on to the returning Torkelsons. What's left of them, that is. Millicent's role changed a bit, more focused on helping Mr. Morgan and his children, softening his tough exterior. While they were very much opposite in every sense of the word.
Hey, lobster! Now, we don't have lobsters in Oklahoma. We have crawdaddies, but they don't get this big except down by the nuclear power plant.
But with that came the possibility of a romance.
Well, excuse me for being concerned.
Well, excuse me for having a life.
Well, excuse me for kissing you.
Well,
Nothing.
Dorothy Jane's storylines were mostly connected to Molly. Both dealt with the trials and tribulations of being a teenager quite differently. This sometimes led to the realization that they could help each other out, learning from the other.
Don't you understand that by cheating on that book report, the person you're really cheating is yourself? And what happens when you have to do another one? What, are you going to steal again? Not from you.
But other times they were just at each other's throats.
This place isn't big enough for the two of us. There's a bus leaving the mall at noon. Be on it.
Chucky Lee probably had the largest amount of character growth.
I just don't know, honey.
Please, Mama. I don't get to be the center of attention very often. I'm a middle child, not to mention the only male in a family of female siblings.
While he was kind of in the background on the Torkelsons, he really shined and stood out on Almost Home.
Yeah, well, we gotta find a boy to model today. Well, he's gotta be 10 or 11, not too tall, but not short either. Cute face, and he should move well.
Unfortunately, with Chucky Lee becoming a bit more of a standout character, Mary Sue was kind of shifted to the background a bit.
And who is this gorgeous young lady?
She's Mary Sue Torkelson. You're not so bad yourself.
She was still valuable to the show, though, offering some funny responses to the family's crazy situations.
Tonight's my beauty night.
It's gonna be a long night.
There are swans in the swimming pool. You should see them just glide across the water. You know, swans are the most graceful, elegant creatures.
Right up until they poop in the pool.
So the double-edged sword with Almost Home comes with how much they adapted the Torkelsons to be much more like a contemporary sitcom. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It was very watchable, and fit in perfectly with other shows at the time like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Full House, and several others. In fact, it had an unofficial tie-in with the other NBC show Blossom, most likely trying to bolster its audience appeal.
Like, did anyone ever tell you that you look just like that guy on Blossom? Yeah, right, like he's gonna buy that.
Ah, you really think so? I mean, that guy's sort of good looking.
But with that, the show lost what made it original with the Torkelsons. Completely gone was any worry of financial peril, and most episodes were predictable, but still entertaining as far as sitcoms go.
Well, the Swans attacked the sushi bar. It was a standoff for a while, but we got them back in the pool. Well, all but one.
While Lee Norris and Brittany Morgan would go on to have very successful careers, it's pretty interesting how many folks made a guest appearance on this show who are also destined for greatness. Allison Hannigan made a few appearances before she went to band camp.
That was the worst excuse for dribbling I've ever seen.
No, it wasn't. This is.
And dare I say, we might have had a precursor to the Justice League, the Snyder Cut, with these two guest spots.
I'm sorry, I must be boring you.
Nah.
It's just that you're so easy to talk to.
Thanks.
But enough about me. Tell me about yourself. Are you involved in any other activities besides football?
Debate team.
Now you listen to me, you monosyllabic caveman.
Hey, I never had mono in my life.
For the past 2 hours, I've been forced to sit here, watch you shoot baskets, scratch yourself, and draw mustaches on the pictures of all the poets.
Just the men. The women already had them.
But I think that the most amazing guest appearance came from an up-and-coming rap superstar. Now, I'm not talking about Marky Mark. I'm talking about Tommy Tom. Okay, that was stupid. While pretty fun and enjoyable, unfortunately, this was the last leg of this series' run. It only lasted 13 episodes, and the final episode aired in June of 1993. Now, to be honest, I hadn't even heard of this show when it came out. I caught some reruns on the Disney Channel when I was watching Growing Pains. Another great show. So if you can find this show, I highly recommend watching it. Thank you so much for watching, and please leave a comment. I'll be back soon, but I'm going to be discussing my top 10 somewhat unknown horror films of the 70s. I hope you check it out. And until then, just remember that love comes in unexpected places, and the new day promises that everything will be alright.